Hello, Brian here with another Proto Tech Tip. Today I'm going to run down the differences between using fasteners and welding in your custom sheet metal enclosures. Here at Protocase, we will offer a wide range of services, materials, and components so that you can get the custom enclosure or part you need for your specific requirements. Our one-stop shop includes things like a large selection of fasteners, as well as in-house welding. For custom sheet metal enclosures, both fasteners and welding are often important aspects of the fabrication process. We've done Proto Tech tips on both welding and fasteners in the past. Check out the links below in the description if you would like further information. However, you may be wondering, does my project require fasteners or welding? When is it best to use one versus the other? Well, that is what we're going to be breaking down today. Self-clinching fasteners are inexpensive and commonly used to achieve a variety of design goals, including attaching parts and components to your design, as well as holding an enclosure together. There are many types of fasteners, and we've got some useful videos and blog posts that break down the specific uses for each style of fastener. Check out the description for a link to those. Let's focus on the fastener options for attaching an enclosure together. You'll have a few different options. First, you can secure an enclosure together by placing studs on exterior parts, secured with a hex nut on the inside. This is really common for rear panels of rack mount enclosures, as there's no exposed screw heads. You can also use right angle fasteners. This type of fastener is pressed into sheet metal in order to provide a right angle attachment point. They are really useful for creating a solid, clean attachment in a sheet metal enclosure. Another way to secure an enclosure that we often see would be by placing internal tabs within the walls of your enclosure during the bending process, then securing them with self-clinching nuts. So those are a few common ways to attach your enclosure together via fasteners. Let's move over to welding. Welding is another commonly used method to secure an enclosure together, as well as attach parts to your design and mount components. Welding is often used to provide additional water and dust resistance. We offer a few distinct types of welding processes here at Protocase, as we covered in our Proto Tech Tip about welding. These include spot welding, seam welding, fillet welds, plug welds, and tack welds. I recommend checking out that Proto Tech Tip if you want to get the full breakdown. When it comes to using welding to secure an enclosure together, ultimately it comes down to either using welding in discrete segments to fasten at specific points, or fully welding the seams. Spot welding, plug welding, and tack welding can each be used to join the metal of an enclosure together at a single point. On the other hand, we have seam welding. Seam welding is applied from a handheld torch, where filler wire is continuously heated and applied to join two pieces of metal in order to provide a durable seal. Seam welding is generally used to completely close off corners or seams. The end result is a strong, permanent joint. So both welding and fasteners can each be used to join an enclosure together. The differences between these two options comes down to the respective attributes and cost. First, welding is a permanent bond, so it'll be a real struggle to take apart once it is welded together. Fasteners, on the other hand, are removable, depending on the type of fastener that's used. If you'll need to disassemble your enclosure at some point, talk to us to discuss your options. Second, seam welding fuses along the seam of a joint, which can provide a much more complete seal than fasteners are capable of providing. Many customers use this in order to provide weather, dust, radiation, or waterproofing to their enclosure. If your enclosure is going to be placed in a harsh environment with expensive components housed within, seam welding is your best choice. One important disclaimer: Protocase does not test for water resistance. Therefore, we strongly suggest testing the integrity of your enclosure to ensure it will stand up to your application before placing expensive components inside. Another difference between fasteners and welding is in the strength of the bond they provide. Welding adds more strength and structure to an enclosure than fasteners will. If excess strain is going to be placed on your part or enclosure, welding could stand up to the forces slightly better. And finally, price. Fasteners are significantly cheaper than welding. This means fasteners should be your default option if you think both will get the job done for your application. For example, let's compare these two 5-sided enclosures. Both have the exact same dimensions, 10 by 10 by 6 inches. This enclosure is held together with PEM nut fasteners, while the other has fully seam welded sides. Check out the price difference. The enclosure using fasteners costs approximately $375, while the welded enclosure quoted at around $550. The difference in price was over $175, which is an almost 50% increase in the price of the enclosure. So, to sum it all up, when you're determining whether or not to use fasteners or welding in your design, you should ask yourself these questions. Will my enclosure be stored in an environment where there is a risk of dirt, dust, water, or radiation? Would my enclosure's internal components be affected if they were exposed to any of these elements? Do my requirements dictate that my enclosure requires extra strength beyond what is typical for that enclosure style? If you answered yes to one or more of these questions, a welded enclosure may be needed to meet your requirements. Otherwise, a custom enclosure with self-clinching fasteners should cover your needs. At the end of the day, no matter what your project requires, Protocase is here to get your project finished quickly and in whatever quantity you require. Thanks for watching this week's Proto Tech Tip. We will see you back here next week.